and doubts and maybe worries is the word about AI. And I won't say that that is not necessarily from ignorance. I don't, I mean, I know that there are a lot of potentialities associated with these technologies. But my own, I guess you could say, disposition is to uh, put a brake on technological development. I think that generally things happen too quickly, and that we don't take the time to think things out as before we put them out. That's a quote from Marshall McLuhan that I'm going to mention later in the class. Okay, so the title of today's class is Five Threats of the AI Takeover of Our World. I don't know if takeover is the best word, but the way that it is heralded in everything from economics to healthcare to education, essentially every major institution of modernity is being impacted by AI. Maybe not so much today, but in its supposed promises, in its supposed applications to healthcare, to education, to economics, to the world of work and jobs and professions. There are a lot of very, very long-ranging effects of AI. So talking about takeover is kind of this idea that if we allow the development of AI systems without any real reflection, without any philosophical inquiry, there is, I think, a very real chance that AI will take over in the sense of fundamentally changing how we do things, right? So basically, I divided my class up into five different threats. I want to start by looking at some of the things that this AI revolution is supposed to herald. Some of the potential benefits that we hear about in the news, that we hear about from companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and all of these major AI systems that when they talk to their shareholders and talk about all of the benefits that are coming and all of this mass growth in economic growth and productivity gains, et cetera. I want to look at what they're saying and then try to break apart some of the things that aren't discussed, at least not very publicly or from my perspective, not with enough seriousness, right? And so the first threat is a further acceleration of the growth economy. Threat number two, the deepening of the energy crisis. Threat number three, the epistemicide or the death of other forms of knowing, indigenous forms of knowledge. Threat number four is educational, the death of educare and educere, a fundamental change in what it means to learn. And then threat number five is maybe a little bit more existential in nature, but the alignment problem. There's a lot of discussion from some of the major thinkers, developers of AI, about the threats of what happens when we make something that is smarter than us. Are we going to be able to control it to direct in the future? All right, so let's get started here. Here, let me make it a little bit larger here so we can see. So yeah, what are some of the revolutionary changes and benefits that artificial intelligence systems are supposedly going to bring to our world? Um, and this goes beyond, just AI, but every new technological invention, every new tool, every new technique that is invented, that hits the market, that is made available to us, is justified by the supposed benefits it will bring about. If you go back 15 or 20 years, to the beginning of you know, people largely said that this is going to, fundamentally change how we receive information. It's going to, bring the world together. It's going to, break the monopoly of these major news corporations. It's going to allow people to communicate better from one side of the world to the other. And when people talked about all of these great benefits of social media, they didn't talk about, the fracturing of human society into groups that are diametrically opposed. They didn't talk about, addiction to screen time, to virtual worlds where, young people today, are suffering, depression and mental health crises. A lot of these are linked to this addiction to social media profiles, all of this body shaming that goes, around the predatory effects of people using these technologies to prey on young people who are vulnerable. These are all very real and well documented, problems associated with social media. But if you go back 15 or 20 years ago, nobody talked about that. We were just discussing all of the potential benefits, right? So every new technological invention is justified by, some of the supposed benefits. One of my favorite examples recently is Elon Musk, one of his many business ventures, apart from, sending rockets to Mars and, creating self-driving cars. He also created a company called Neuralink. And Neuralink is essentially about implanting chips, electronic chips, into the human brain. That's kind of what it's about. But if you look at the Neuralink website, and you look about what it is, how it justifies itself publicly, through public relations, through the advertisements. It says that, it's being developed to help people with paralysis gain a certain sense of independence. People who are paralyzed, right? Who don't have the ability to move, from their neck down. And so by implanting these chips into their brain, people are being able to control a mouse just with their thoughts, right? And there's a lot of these trials that are really, kind of fascinating, that people who can't move have something implanted into their mind, and all of a sudden, they can move a mouse. They can surf the internet without the aid of somebody else. And so it's this idea. Neuralink is about trying with paralysis, gain more independence. Obviously, the main interest in developing Neuralink is not about helping this subset of humanity. It's about Elon Musk's, really desire about merging, the machine and the human brain, about really, bringing together, this supposed singularity, wherein human beings merge with machines. He's talked about this in interviews and hopes for this. And obviously, the development of this company is about trying to do that. But there's always, these stated public relations, benign examples of, this technology is going to be really great for people. Social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter is really going to help bring the world together. And despite, some of the advantages that come, despite the fact that people with paralysis, certainly do, gain some independence with this brain machine interface. The real dangers, potential dangers, are never discussed. So from this superficial vantage point, AI, what we see in the news is it talks about it's going to cure cancer. It's going to help us solve the climate crisis. It's going to grow our economy thousands of times over by increasing productivity, beyond the scopes of our wildest dreams. It's going to automate millions of jobs, freeing up humans for that. I left that the end of that sentence unfinished, because one of the things that's fascinating is the idea of automating jobs as a way to free human beings was the exact discourse. If you go back maybe 100 years, the Keynesian economic theory was that, 100 years ago, when machines began to automate jobs during the Industrial Revolution, there was this idea that, as machines, as industrial output grew, human beings were going to be liberated from the toil of factories. And there was this idea, Keynes himself thought that, by the time that we're living in today, people would be working 5 or 10 hours a week and spend our time, reading novels and engaging in art and writing poetry and doing all of these higher things, right? That obviously isn't the case. People continue to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week. There's still enormous inequality around the world, right? So this idea that AI, through this productivity revolution, is going to free us from the menial jobs of today, but free us into what? I think that a lot of these questions aren't answered. And if we look back into history, I think we should at the very least doubt, some of these, supposed miracles that AI AI will bring. Marshall McLuhan was a Canadian thinker, active back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And he was a founder of the media ecology movement, really someone who tried to put technological development under the guise of philosophical inquiry, which I think, again, is necessary. And he said one of his famous quotes towards the end of his life was that we need to think things out before we put them out. Meaning we have to think about some of the long-term effects of the technologies that we make available, that we bring into the world before we make them available, right? Let's take the time to think things through, right? Through the rapid adoption and scaling, though the rapid adoption and scaling of AI systems once again shows our apparent inability to do just that, I think that the potential downsides of AI make the need for reflection urgent. One of the fascinating things about ChatGPT, kind of the most famous iteration of these large language models and what really put kind of AI systems at the forefront, was after it was released, I think in 2022 it had over 300 million downloads within the first couple weeks. It was instantaneous, right? It was made available, and without any sort of reflection or anything like that, boom, just like that, it became a part of our lives. People, adopted it massively in mass, right? And this, despite the fact, like we're going to see here in a second, the people who developed these systems, people who have, gained Nobel Peace or Nobel Prizes, Geoffrey Hinton, who's also often referred to as one of the godfathers of AI, was urgently saying we need to stop. We shouldn't be making these things available. We need to reflect, despite all of these warnings that were out in the public. There's a massive, almost instantaneous adoption of these technologies, right? Um, Another thing we should remember is that some of the leading authorities in the question of AI alignment, Eliezer Yudkowsky is one that we're going to talk about a little bit later, have gone so far as to call for a bombing campaign against giant GPU clusters to halt the rapid growth of AI development. So the people who've developed these systems, not all of them, of course, but some very reputable people are saying that we should put a moratorium on them, and others, a little bit more radical, are saying we need to start bombing these things before we lose control of it. Even the world's richest man, Elon Musk, originally called for a 6-month moratorium on further AI development. There's this big, letter that was written, and all of these very influential people said we should stop and think things through. And of course, we did not. Given game theory, first mover advantage, market mechanisms, sheer greed, and a quasi religious impulse by many Silicon Valley tech bros, the common sense approach of thinking things out is fading from opportunity. And there's a lot of reasons why people say that we can't stop and think things through. One of the common, kind of things you hear is that, well, if we, talking about us in the West, the United States, Europe, whatever, if we don't develop these things, China's going to do that, is going to do it. And if China does it, it's going to be, 100% worse. So this idea of game theory, this idea of market mechanisms. But then there's also this kind of religious impulse by a lot of the people who are developing these things, right? Sam Altman had this famous quote saying that, he bought a bunker, I think somewhere in Mexico. And in 2017, he said, I fear that we might lose control of the development of these AI systems I'm working on. And so he bought this end of the world apocalyptic bunker for when the machines take over. In that same interview, he says, but I just have to see what happens. If we can create this artificial general intelligence or super intelligence, it's kind of like we have to see what happens. We know it's dangerous. We know that we don't know, that we're ignorant of some of the long-term complications, but it's this almost we have to see, we have to find out type of mentality, right? So, given, despite the fact that it seems that we're not able to think things out, I do believe that human beings have the ability, unlike, other animals that we share this world with, that we have brains. We have the ability to reflect, to think, to put restraint mechanisms in order. And here are, five of the threats that I think are very real that warrant a little bit more discussion. I want to outline these five threats. First is the threat of further acceleration. One of the things, despite the fact that people say that AI is going to cure cancer and stop climate change, uh, as of today, the most lucrative use of AI systems right now is by gas and oil corporations around the world who use these systems to analyze and discover new reserves of gas and oil fields for extraction. This is a quote from a press release. Artificial intelligence could be the new shale revolution. Just as fracking opened up new deposits of oil and gas, AI is turbocharging the hunt for fossil fuels and minerals, helping energy companies quickly map and find new areas to drill and mine. In May of this year, just last month, the oil giant Shell announced it will use generative AI to hasten oil and gas exploration as part of its broader strategy to improve safety, efficiency, and sustainability across its operations. Of course, when Shell talks about safety, efficiency, and sustainability, it's talking about extracting more oil and gas as quickly as possible, right? AI solutions provider Spark Cognition claimed that the patented machine learning algorithm will achieve potentially increased production and higher success rates and could find previously untouched fossil fuel resources in the ocean floor in as little as 9 days instead of 9 months. If you look at some of the press releases by OpenAI and Anthropic and a lot of these big AI corporations, they've been losing billions of dollars, right? They're not making a lot of money. There's all of the hype about increased productivity is on the hope for the future, and they've been in red for a long time. But one of the few areas where AI is actually being used profitably is the fossil fuel corporations who are using this to increase fossil fuel exploration, right? So despite all of the discourse that AI is going to help us solve the climate crisis, as it stands right now, its main use is in extracting more fossil fuels. So we can burn more fossil fuels, increase climate change. Large language models and AI development is not occurring in a vacuum. That's important to understand. It's not occurring in this kind of ethical void where we can use these systems for, whatever is good and beneficial. No, it's being developed within a concrete economic reality defined by corporate greed, growth economics, market competition, unlimited consumer demand, etc. The prime uses of any technological development within a concrete, real, tangible economic framework will be to accelerate the economic dynamics already in place, right? AI is not going to be used primarily. It's not saying that it can't be, but its main foundational use is not going to be about how to sustainably degrow our economy or how to decouple economic growth from resource use or how to use energy more sustainably. No, it's going to be used by the economic powers that exist, which is why Shell and other major fossil fuel companies are taking advantage of this technology to push the same economic model, the same energy model, the same resource extraction model, right? Though AI systems might be able to help climate modeling and other highly publicized advantages toward more sustainable civilization, its foremost use and primary application will be to deepen the social, economic, and ecological breakdown that defines our current system. Our current system is one of acceleration, accelerating resource use, resource extraction, mining, energy use, economic growth, right? Nothing that we're doing is arresting or changing that model. And given this, current system, AI can only will primarily be used as an of a system that is bound for failure. I've argued in several different classes that, the prime folly of modernity is to assume that we can grow forever within a limited biosphere, right? Eventually, we're going to come up against limits. And AI, as it is currently modeled within the system which we're modeled, is only going to accelerate, that process. Threat number two, which is related to number one, is a deepening of the energy crisis. Just last month, the International Energy Agency, IEA, let loose a report titled Energy and AI Projects. And it reports that electricity demand from data centers worldwide is set to more than double by 2030 to around 945 terawatt hours, slightly more than the entire electricity consumption of Japan, one of the industrial powers of the world. In the United States, power consumption by data centers is on course to account for almost half of the growth in electricity demand in the next 5 years. Driven by AI use, the US economy is set to consume more electricity in 2030 for processing data than for manufacturing all energy intensive goods, including aluminum, steel, cement, and chemicals. AI data centers are driving a surge in new natural gas power plants around the country. So not only are AI systems being utilized by fossil fuel corporations to find, new gas and oil deposits, make it more easier, more profitable for them to extract, the remaining reserves of fossil fuel deposits. But the demand by these systems themselves, which obviously use an enormous amount of electricity, is further pushing the need for energy, right? And yes, fossil fuel, AI centers are trying to use solar and wind. And here in El Salvador, where I live, there's, talk of using our geothermal energy resources. But quite simply, it's not enough, right? It's not enough. And so if we need to use more nuclear power, if we need to extract more fossil fuels, well, then so be it. There's a lot of very interesting quotes that have come out in the last year by leaders in the AI revolution. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, said, the world is actually headed for a really bad energy crisis because of AI. He said that last year. Elon Musk, just a couple months ago, said that energy scarcity will be inevitable due to AI growth. And he has predicted that sometime between the end of 2025 and end of 2026, we're going to start to see blackouts around the world because of excess electricity demand from these AI systems. Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, says it very well. He says, we need energy in all forms, renewable, non-renewable, whatever, right? This idea that what we need as human beings is energy. And it doesn't matter if it comes from fossil fuels, if it comes from nuclear power, we just need all sources of energy, right? And, a lot of these, a lot of companies who want to, greenwash, their ecological footprint will show, look how much we've invested in renewable power and solar power and wind power, and you can cherry pick your statistics, and you can show on a graph how much solar power has grown, how much wind power has grown. But if you really want to look at the total energy output, what you see is that at the same time that solar power, renewable energies are growing, fossil fuels are also growing. The only years that we have reduced the amount of fossil fuels that we have used were in 2008 and 2020. 2008 being the economic crisis caused by the mortgage crisis, and 2020 obviously being the year of COVID, right? Every other use has grown in tandem with other types of technologies, right? So solar, wind, and other renewables are not replacing fossil fuels. They're just adding another energy source, right? There's a naive hope that artificial intelligence systems will crack nuclear fusion, this great hope that we'll have this unlimited source of supposedly clean energy. Though no one really thinks about what are the ecological effects of unlimited energy, right? What will we do with that energy, right? In what we can see is that the growth in energy use and resource extraction and consumption, right, is on a one-to-one scale. More energy we have, the more we extract. The more we extract, the more ecological breakdown we might have. We might not be, if AI does crack nuclear fusion, we might not be filling our atmosphere with carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, but we will be extracting ever more things from the earth for our human use. The Schmidt quote above, that we need energy in all forms, whatever, shows clearly how humans are behaving like animals, right? Animals, every animal, every biological in the natural world is programmed to consume all available energy resources within their grasp with little foresight to long-term consequences. Last year we did a series of classes on human ecology, and you see all of these, these boom and bust cycles that happen in the natural world, right? A certain organism finds an enormous amount of food or energy surplus. It will consume that energy as fastly and quickly as possible until that energy source is gone and then it collapses. And what we're seeing today is, that same boom and bust curve. We're still on the upward, we're nearing the top. And the question is, are human beings, are we smarter than that? Are we able to reflect that it might not be in our best interest to consume all of the energy, available to us? Kind of changing to maybe a more cultural or social issue. Another threat, I think, of AI systems, especially these large language models, is what's known as epistemicide. This word was coined by a Portuguese sociologist, refers to the killing, the silencing, or the devaluing of knowledge systems. It describes a process where certain ways of knowing, often those held by marginalized communities, are suppressed or erased to make way for dominant knowledge systems, particularly those associated with Western modernity. This can happen through various means, including colonization, cultural suppression, and the prioritization of certain types of knowledge in research and policy, right? So Sousa Santos, this sociologist, looked at, how throughout the history of colonization, colonization wasn't just this violent takeover of people's resources. It was also, telling people, in many parts of the world, indigenous people were prohibited from their own languages, doing their own practices. They were, through obligatory schooling, they were taught that their own traditions were inferior or negative or demon possessed. A lot of times, the Catholic Church and churches were involved in this. But this idea of devaluing other ways of knowing. And I would say that this epistemicide is continuing through what we see in how large language models are kind of taking over this process of learning, right? All systems, especially the large language models, the AI systems of today, contribute to epistemicide through reinforcing the idea that everything that can be known or that is worth knowing can be found on the internet, and reducing even further the embodied aspect of knowledge acquisition, right? Large language models are trained on obviously enormous data sets, right? But they're not trained on the knowledge of an indigenous elder who lives in a community without access to the internet, right? They're not trained on this enormous body of other ways of knowing, whether it be, small scale peasant communities throughout the world, indigenous communities throughout the world, people who are excluded from modernity, excluded from internet access, right? And assuming that these systems are going to be of all the knowledge in the world is also silencing those voices who are not part of its training data, right? Are a question we should ask, are these large language models trained on the knowledge and wisdom of indigenous grandmothers whose knowledge is encoded in stories, in the experience of living in place, in embodied human experience, right? So again, it's this idea that everything that's worth knowing has already been known, has already been encoded on the internet, is already available, right? And obviously, the internet has an enormous body of knowledge. There's not to say that it's not a resource, but it's not exhaustive, right? And there is a difference between knowledge that is encoded through the internet and knowledge that occurs through an embodied existence, right? This trust, David Cayley, who is a friend and one of the, I guess you could say, intellectual biographers of uh, trust in embodied an experience can potentially lead us towards an understanding of what is properly human. And I think that's important. This idea that we can create limits to our knowledge by embodying our knowledge within a place, within a natural geography, within a territory, within a real community. Um, a question that I think is worth asking is, do we know about an oak tree simply because we prompted an LLM correctly? Because we had a question, Chat GPT, please tell me how are oak trees grown, right? And automatically we get this really great essay, that's crafted from an enormous body of knowledge encoded, in the on the internet. Or does knowing what an oak tree is and how it germinates and how it grows, is there something categorically different from that knowledge if we, take a hike through the woods with our children and gather a bag of acorns, and then we save those acorns through the winter, properly scarifying them, stratifying them through a certain amount of cold hours, and then in the springtime we open up a hole in the earth and we plant those seeds. We get the soil underneath our fingernails, and then we water that seed and we see it germinate, and we add compost around and we slowly watch as it grows, as it begins to branch out, as it eventually, offers, shade that we can sit in. Is there something different about that knowledge that's embodied, that's participative, that, is something about actually doing something rather than just prompting, a machine to tell us what we need to know? And that's kind of where Sousa Santos would say that LLMs and AI systems can contribute to epistemicide both by, ignoring all of the contributions to other ways of knowing that are embodied by indigenous people and land-based peoples around the world, but then also by moving us away from embodied forms of knowledge acquisition. The fourth threat that I think is related to education. There's a lot of really interesting debates going on right now about what is the best way to incorporate artificial intelligence systems into schools. And a lot of uh, nation. I just read a really interesting article. I think it was Latvia is one of the leaders in, from grade one onwards, teaching young people how to prompt LLMs, right? How to use AI systems as efficiently as possible from the very youngest ages, right? And I would think that, in our desire for ease, efficiency, and smoothness, what Jack Ellul called technique, AI systems will supposedly automate and iron out all of the messy processes of being human, right? And one of those messy processes, one of those things that is difficult and muddlesome and not exactly, easy to plan out, is education. Education is difficult. Every child learns differently. Every child has different needs, has different interests, right? It's not necessarily easy to universalize, education, right? In the realm of education, AI tutors are, being brought about to combine the instantaneous access to all data and information, on the internet that's codified in the training data of these LLMs with the algorithmic monitoring of individual learning approaches. The idea is that every child will have an AI tutor that has an access to every type of knowledge that they need to know, and at the same time knows how to, best relate to every child. They will be able to, monitor how you learn, what you learn, and optimize learning techniques, to each child, right? The foreseeable result is that learning will be reduced to efficient knowledge acquisition through the correct prompting of the machine, right? It will no longer be about learning, but about asking the right questions of the machine, right? Instead of education as training or molding, educare, or as drawing out, elucere. These are two kind of etymological roots of what education means. Education will become nothing more than the quickest way to answer through a correct prompting of the machine, right? It's not about learning, about drawing out what's inside us. It's no longer about finding the ways to mold young people to fit into the world we want to create. It's just about asking the right questions of the machine, right? Um, Marshall McLuhan, in his famous book Understanding Media, he said that rapidly, he believed, I guess, to frame this quote, he said that he believed that all technologies, all media, are extensions of the human being. Just as the hoe is an extension of the physical muscular power of man, right? And just as the telephone was an extension of our ear, our ability to hear. And he said that rapidly we are approaching the final phase of the extensions of man, right? We've already extended our physical capabilities through all of the industrial technologies, all of the machines. We've extended our central nervous system through media, through phones, internet, and all of these things. He said the final phase of this extension of man will be the technological simulation of consciousness, when the creative process of knowing will be collectively and corporately extended to the whole of human society. He was writing this in the 1960s, right? A lot of people see him as kind of this prophetic voice of understanding where the computer was going to eventually yield us, right? And so, kind of taking this progression of McLuhan's thought, we can say technologies are extensions of human abilities and skills, right? But one of the things that Ivan Illich really brought to the forefront is that past a certain threshold or a certain watershed, those technologies are no longer just extensions, but they amputate human ability. They replace human ability rather than complement it. There's something fundamentally different between a $3 million combine used by industrial agriculture and a hoe or a small scale rototiller, right? There's something fundamentally different in the sense that, the larger, the more complex, the more powerful a technology, it amputates, it replaces human ability rather than complementing it. Instead of using a technology for an autonomous human end, when technologies grow past a certain threshold, we increasingly are forced to adapt to the world that technologies create and impose. Technologies are no longer allowing us to forge our own world, but they become so pervasive that the human being has to change his routines, his ways of living, right, to fit into the technological milieu. And the question to end with is what might describe the characteristics of a world wherein we amputate our ability to autonomously learn? What is the milieu, the new changing environment where human thought is subjugated to machine learning? That's a question that I think that urgently needs to be asked, especially as AI systems are pushed into the world of schools. And lastly, the alignment problem. This is one that is perhaps more existential. It's one that's gotten a little bit of press and concern, maybe because of we like, this kind of collapse mentality. But if all of these issues were not worrisome enough, there still exists the potential threats associated with creating something that is infinitely more intelligent than us, that might not necessarily be aligned with what is good for humanity. Simply put, the alignment problem in the AI world is the question of how to create a super intelligent artificial intelligence system that is friendly or helpful rather than dangerous. This is Geoffrey Hinton. He was the godfather of AI. He won the Nobel Prize. He worked with Google for decades and decades. And right after ChatGPT was released to the public, he quit his job at Google because he said, I wanted to be free enough to warn humanity about some of the dangers of these systems. And he said, what's the worst case scenario? He gave a talk earlier this year, and he said, what's the worst case scenario? It's very possible that humanity might just be a phase in the progress of intelligence. Biological intelligence could give way to, to digital intelligence. After that, we might not be needed. Digital intelligence is immortal as long as it's stored somewhere, right? The key issue is not human competitive intelligence, as the letter puts it, it's what happens after AI gets to smarter than human intelligence. This is from Hinton again. Key thresholds there may not be obvious. We definitely can't calculate in advance what happens when, and it currently seems imaginable, that a research lab would cross critical lines without noticing. What happens when we create something that is infinitely smarter than us, more intelligent, able to deceive us, right? Eliezer Yudkowsky is another major thinker, especially in the issue of AI alignment. And he said that This is a quote from a article that he wrote for Time magazine in 2023. In that article is where he argued that the best course of action is to start bombing these clusters of GPUs around the world where enormous amounts of electricity are being used to train these artificial intelligence systems. He says that many researchers steeped in these issues of AI alignment, including myself, expect that the most likely result of building a superhumanly smart AI under anything remotely like the current circumstances is that literally everyone on Earth will die. That's kind of a extreme quote, but I want you to know that this isn't something that was, written on some obscure blog by some kind of crazy guy in a basement. This is by a person who's been employed by the major artificial intelligence systems companies around the world. He's worked with Google. He's worked with OpenAI. He writes articles for Time magazine. He says that without precision and preparation, the most likely outcome is AI that does not do what we want it to do and does not care for us nor for sentient life in general. That kind of caring is something that could, in principle, be imbued into an AI. We could do better, he says, but we are not ready and we do not currently know how to do it. We do not know how to put the restraint mechanisms in place that will ensure that this thing that we are creating, that is potentially infinitely smarter than us, will not want to kill us. And he said that, at the very least, we should be 100% sure of this before we do that. Absent that caring, we get the AI does not love you, nor does it hate you. You are simply made of atoms that it can use for something else, right? It's not that we're going to create this Terminator like AI system that's going to want to have vengeance on all of us. No, it's simply that we don't imbue the proper safety mechanisms into this machine that is going to be infinitely smarter than us in some regards, and that it sees us as expendable for its own aims. This is a very real threat. And like I said, lots of people who are developing these technologies understood that threat and have been trying to call for a certain moratorium, a slowness to slow down. But because of all of the geopolitical threats, because of the market mechanisms, because of the fact that there's this huge competition, who's going to have the first mover advantage, who's going to profit from this most, nobody stops, nobody slows down. To conclude, James Lovelock was a biologist who was most famous for creating the Gaia hypothesis, this idea that the Earth is a self-regulating, alive system. So he's this person very influential in the ecological movement who cared deeply about the world and wanted to see us take care of it and see human systems, adapt. And when he turned 100, maybe he was losing his sanity, some people say, but he wrote a book called Novacene, which is interesting. It's the coming age of hyperintelligence. In that book, I think it was released in 2019, he concluded that we humans are simply not intelligent or willing enough to put in place the necessary political, economic, and cultural restraint mechanisms that would allow us to function as part of a living, self-regulating planet. He essentially kind of gave up hope in his 100th year. We're not going to change. We're not going to stop climate change. We're not going to stop this economic behemoth that continues to want to grow and extract and pollute the world, he said. He pinned his hope on future AI systems that would be more intelligent than us at tending to this miraculous blue planet swirling through the void of darkness of space. He says that the experience of watching your garden grow gives you some idea of how future AI systems will feel when observing human life. Lovelock argued that the machines will realize that they need organic life to keep the planet at a habitable temperature, and that we might even be happier when we are watched over by the machines of loving grace. Right. So this is kind of the beneficial view of AI, someone who's very influential in the ecological movement of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Lovelock said that we're not going to change. Human beings don't have the capacity to change. We're going to continue to devour the planet, to devour one another. What we need is machines of loving grace who will watch over us, who will become, yes, the lords of the world, but hopefully they'll treat us well. And I guess the question that I want to leave us with is if this hope of Lovelock, that I think is a hope that a lot of people harbor, right? A lot of, that we hope ourselves, is this hope enough to warrant the acceleration of an economic system destroying the biosphere, the deepening energy crisis, the epistemicide of other ways of knowing, the loss of the ability to teach our children to learn autonomously, and the very real threats of misalignment? What happens if Lovelock is wrong and the machines are not, loving grace? Or might we stop to think things out, to go slower, to create guardrails and restraint mechanisms that allow this technology and any new technological innovation to operate within the framework of human freedom, of wide boundary conception of goodness, right? Might it be good, as Marshall McLuhan said, to think things out before we put them out? All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop my presentation, and I look forward to all of your all's critiques. Thank you very much.